Have you ever seen this meme? Draw two circles and now draw the rest of the flipping L. Something is missing in the middle there. This always resonated with me because I'd always see instructionals and books and things which would talk about how you can just start drawing things with just a box or something. And there was a huge mental block between wanting to draw like a body, a face, an animal, something like that, and starting with these simple forms which fundamentally look different to that thing. This meme captures that frustration, but what's really funny about it is that I think one of the best ways to learn this constructive type of drawing is by learning to draw an owl's head. The reason for that is that an owl's head is already quite simple and straightforward. I'm going to walk you through a process of understanding how to draw this owl head step by step using that constructive approach, and I think it might really help you if you struggle with learning this type of drawing. So the first thing we want to do is understand the owl's head flat, like in 2D. Hard to understand it in 3D if we don't even understand it like in 2D, like a sort of blueprint of its head and face. So when I look at it, it feels like it's quite flat across the top. So let's just imagine it's looking right at me. And then it like comes down the sides, it's got the sides, and then it's got the bottom of the head. So it's kind of rectangular. But as I look at it again, I feel like it's actually coming out a bit wider down towards the sort of neck. So it's a bit wider at the bottom. And then there's this sort of brow, that comes from the corners or roughly around the corners to about the middle of the face, like this. Yeah. And then there's a sort of heart shape, amazing design owl has. I haven't studied owl anatomy. I don't know anything about owls, to be honest, other than that they're magical creatures with magical powers. So there is a beak here, right? And eyeballs. So there's these ball shapes. It kind of feels like they slightly are tucked in behind that brow shape, like this, something like this. Okay, and amazing ears on this horned owl coming off the corners like that, and pupils. Okay, so a great start for learning to construct something is just to think about it the flat version. It's like you get your IKEA flat pack furniture, starts off flat, and you are going to make it 3D later. Okay, so we kind of had a rectangle. So it's kind of, the reason an owl head is great for this is it's not that big of a leap to go from the flat version to the 3D version. Some stuff that's a bit more of a leap. Okay, so what if we turn this a bit now? We're going to try and make it 3D and turn it a little bit like this owl head is turned. Okay, so what we've got is, well, we had that kind of rectangular shape for the front of the owl's head, like this, right? But we realized that it kind of gets a bit wider coming down to the bottom. And now we can see a little bit of the side, like that. A little bit of the top as well. So we've gone from the sort of rectangle to this kind of shape. Not a massive leap. What we can now add, we had that brow shape. Now this time, this brow shape, right, because it was, this is all symmetrical. The center line, because the head is turned a bit, it's going to shift very slightly off to the side. So like now the center line down the owl's face will be like here, let's say. And this brow shape that we have here that kind of comes in front of the eyes is going to kind of curve down like this, go across here, and then curve around like that, because we're looking at it a little bit from an angle now. And so the middle of it shifts across. And that brow shape, it's these curved shapes like this. And the more that the owl's head turn, the more of an angle we're going to look at these curves from. If the owl's head turns even more, then that far side of this brow shape might start to look like that. But it hasn't, it might kind of end up looking like this, But it hasn't turned that much, so it's just a little bit. So not much of a change from here to here. Okay, so what we can do is add the beak, and that again is like shifted off to the side a bit like this. And this eye, we can see very similar to up here, but this eye, because the brow is in front of the eyes a bit and the head's turned, the brow is like overlapping the eyeball more, right? So this eye, we're going to have it disappear behind that brow thing a little bit more like that. Okay, so then we can have these amazing ears coming off the corners. Okay, and we had this heart shape, so we can just swoop this round like this. Okay, and we've got the pupils. We kind of want them to be on the same level across, so I'll just draw a little line. This is what people mean by construction lines, is like lines that just help you to map out these forms. Okay, so what we have here is the beginnings of an owl head, which we've constructed. Maybe the eyelids, we just put these kind of ball shapes for these eyes, but there's a little bit of eyelid, so that we could now wrap that over the top. There's a little bit of what do you call that? The black stuff around the eye that we could emphasize on the corners and stuff like that. And now that we've got these simple forms in place, we could do this all better. Like we can pull it back a little bit with an eraser, and it's very, very boxy what we have, and some stuff's a bit wonky. I've done the eyes a little bit wonky and things like that, and it doesn't have any of the light and the shadow yet. So now we've got all of these constructive marks, very simple 3D construction here. And so what we can do is, we could start to think a little bit about that feathered texture, fluffy texture that's in these on this brow. Not really going to change it that much, just add a little bit of fuzz to the line, but it's really just following those initial construction marks. Same around the edge. If we want, we can add that little bit of texture to it if you want. You don't even have to, right? Across the top, it's pretty flat. I don't see that much of a texture to that edge. Can add a little bit of fuzz, down here. What I'm not trying to do now is just start copying out all the details of the feathers, but just the feel of it. And I can draw these eyes better. So I can refer to it. I notice that the pupil is actually also getting overlapped by that brow. Some of the fluffiness here comes down around the beak, that kind of thing. And so what I had was this initial idea. I then built up a very simple version of that, but in 3D. And then I can get into the draw the rest of the flipping owl stuff after that, right? So I hope that has filled in some of the gaps. Now I can think about, okay, all of this area is in shadow because the light is not hitting it. This side of the beak and this part of the ears. And then there's this sort of dark bits of the ears, which we can push into the dark. I don't want to get into copying out all the details really, but I'm drawing the owl now. I have a process for drawing the owl. I've drawn this owl before, so I'll put that up on the screen, and I want to talk a little bit more about the meme. Okay, so what is interesting about the draw the rest of the flipping owl meme is it's about the expert blind spot. The expert blind spot is these things that people who are really experienced with something forget that they didn't know when they were learning. So, it's so easy to just take things for granted because you've been doing them for 20 years. It's second nature. It's like breathing. I don't need to tell you to breathe. And if I'm a really experienced artist, I don't need to tell you to make sure that this eye lines up with the other eye. It's just instinct, right? Or, notice that there is a side plane and a top plane and a front plane to this form or something like that. I don't need to take the step of thinking about it 2D and then turning that form gently in 3D and all that kind of stuff. I don't need to take these steps mentally, consciously, because I'm doing them subconsciously. So this means that when I'm teaching it, I forget to explain it, or I don't even know how to explain it. I don't know how to tell someone how to breathe because it's so innate. And so it's completely natural that sometimes people skip over things which are not obvious to you when you're learning them. And this is something that I found difficult and frustrating when I was learning to draw and paint. When a teacher has these expert blind spots, their resources are not useless. They can be incredibly useful. It's just that you need something to bridge the gap between where you are now and where that resource is going to be useful. So there are books and things like that, which I bought, anatomy books and things, which I did not find useful for drawing. But once I'd pieced together some fundamental basic skills, those books suddenly became really, really useful and important. So that is one of the goals I have for Love Life Drawing, is to fill that gap with this kind of basic, simple explanation of how to do things. Once you've got this idea, you can move from an owl to something else and keep constructing things. And then eventually all the ideas around constructing figures and constructing a face, which we also get into explaining, come to life. They become really useful. Our free Fresh Eyes mini course teaches you how to break down the forms of the human figure in this same really, really simple way. So check out the link below. This type of constructive drawing is something that I didn't think was relevant to me because I just didn't get it. But once I actually, worked through it and really understood it properly, it's become central. I understand now that it's central to drawing, or at least drawing the way that I want to be able to draw. It's not really natural for any of us to think about things this way, but it's definitely learnable. The owl is one of the great ways, I think, of learning how to take a simple, boxy, inorganic form and make it something organic. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know if that helped you in any way. Do try this owl, this specific owl with this specific reference, using that step-by-step process, and let me know how it goes in the comments.